people are apologizing for the most anodyne things. Obviously, if there's something terrible, yes, you should apologize for it. But I kind of worry about, we've really sort of, we're kind of abusing apologies. We've rendered them meaningless, as the same way
Mm-hmm.
we've rendered many concepts meaningless, harm among them. So yeah, but yes, definitely, apologizing is the worst thing you could do, and when you get dragged. And I've tried not to do it.
Yeah,
I've never really done it.
that's good. Do you?
I think you can clarify.
Yeah.
I think clarification is
Mm-hmm.
okay. But the problem is, when you clarify, then they go, well, that wasn't an apology. That's not a good apology. You're like, you're right. It wasn't an apology. It was a clarification.
Yeah, it's like you said with the apologies. There's a formula for how you do an apology where you say I deeply regret. There's all this vocabulary that's the same. I would be much more interested in hearing someone's decision making process behind what they did, even if it doesn't deserve an apology. If someone's caught in the crossfire of cancel culture, it would be much more fulfilling for me to hear them on an hour-long podcast discussing, what their thinking was behind something, rather than to just issue some surface-level apology.
Yeah, and again, I'd be curious your thoughts on this. I feel like this quote unquote social media mobs who are demanding these apologies and ostensibly have the power to ruin somebody's career and or life. How many of them really are there? Like, who are they? They exist in this sort of phantom space.
I think there's a lot less than people think. And I wrote down a quote that you had in The Problem with Everything, this maddening toggle between what I felt and what I was supposed to feel. I think that the amount of people that want me to feel a certain way is much less than I would think, because cancel culture is so amplified that this small amount of people on Twitter can make you feel like you are under the gun of 80% of the population, when in reality, maybe 10 or 20% of people feel like that, but it's just that they're the loudest on Twitter. And I think it's underrated how many people there are that are genuinely fascinated by conversation that goes places that maybe you wouldn't feel comfortable going, and they're not offended. Like, most people that I run into are genuinely fascinated by the ways in which people disagree. And again, I have the comfort, the benefit of not being in the crossfire of the cancel culture debate. So when you're in it, I'm sure it feels a lot more powerful than it actually is. But for the average listener of your podcast or your YouTube show or whatever, I'm sure that person is having a lot more open conversations than what you feel you're allowed to have, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, people want nuance. The idea that somehow the entire culture is now wanting to shut down debate and conversation, and that we're that the right side, that most people are on the right side of history, and the right side of history means like taking down every single statue and piece of art and just relitigating everything from the past. Most people don't want that at all. I would say like 90% of people. First of all, 80% of people don't even know what we're talking about. Most people are not on Twitter. Okay.
Yeah.
Most people on Twitter are not quote unquote social justice warriors.
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking about a tiny slice of people, many of whom are anonymous. They have avatars. We don't even know who they are, who, for whatever reason, we have handed much more power than they really have, or certainly deserve. And so I'm interested in why that is, like why people, leaders of institutions, why presidents of universities, and HR departments in corporations, and people who program film festivals and ideas festivals, and book publishers, why have they ceded authority to this group of people that really don't have any? And I don't know the answer to that question. It completely confounds me. But here we are.
Yeah. I don't know either. I think that the way that you put it in the book with resilience versus fairness, how the older generation cares more about resilience and getting through shit
Mm.
and taking
Toughness versus
responsibility,
fairness. Yeah.
toughness, yeah, toughness versus fairness. And fairness is definitely a part of it for people in my generation, millennial. I guess I'm right on the border of being a millennial, but I I think there's also a huge performative aspect of fairness where people are not necessarily like being fair to other people isn't their main concern. There's a lot of ways in which people perform the act of seeming fair in which they're actually undermining the fairness for that group of people by doing all these things and by accepting these fashionable opinions. It's kind of like I see an opinion, it's very fashionable of me to think this, and now I have to reverse engineer my logic based off what's acceptable to have all these talking points instead of thinking for myself and then coming to that opinion. I I think that it's fairness, but then we have an entire generation that has lost the art of being interesting and thinking for yourself. Yeah, like I think if you're gonna be interesting, Mark Manson. I don't know if you've ever read Mark Manson, but he
No.
put out a dating book that's about basically attracting your partner by being interesting and honest. And the three parts of being interesting, according to Mark Manson, are sharing your opinions strongly, acting boldly, and being detached from other people's opinions, like not investing so heavily in the opinions of others. And so I think the things my generation does well is acting boldly and sharing their opinions strongly, but it's like they're connected into these surface level opinions of other people, and everyone's always like constantly checking, is this okay for me to think, is this not okay for me to think? So when you don't have that third thing, you just can't be interesting. Like it's not even the fact that I disagree with your ideology, it's that you just don't say it in an interesting way. Like I'd rather listen to someone that I disagree with that I feel like is engaging and willing to learn and open to
Right.
things than someone who's kind of like set in their ways, and that's just super
Or you're
boring.
just reciting a script
Yeah,
otherwise,
yeah,
right? Yeah. That's so lost the art of being interesting. Wow, that's kind of devastating. That's a poignant and devastating statement.
yeah. Well,